Wir sind gerade auf dem Namco Bandai Showcase in Berlin, haben uns jetzt gerade Grid Autosport angeschaut. Und hier sind Toby und James von Codemasters und wir werden uns mal ein bisschen über das Spiel unterhalten. So, yeah, it was pretty cool to play it actually. And but you said something like it's not just a simulation; it's also more fun experience right now. Yeah. Like you want to go in that direction?
Absolutely. The grid games have always been games. They're not been simulators. That's the key thing that we do with all of our grid games. And what we try to do is create an experience of what it's like to be a racing driver. So we don't simulate real world values. What we do is we create what it feels like to be out on track, what it feels like to drive these particular vehicles, and particularly for this game, what it feels like to compete in these types of motorsport.
Okay, and you have a lot of variety in it, right? Like you have like night races and touring and everything. Can you probably skip us through a bit of?
Yeah, we've got 5 very different ways to race, which is very quickly, it's touring car racing, endurance, we've got open wheel racing, street racing, and then we've got tuner competitions, which is time attack and drift. And each of those requires you to drive very differently. You need to learn different techniques. The AI drive very differently in those styles of racing. So that's already giving you a lot of variety. Then we've got the most content we've ever put in a grid game, so that we've very carefully picked cars that match up with those styles of racing. So we've got around about kind of 80, 85 cars. They're all picked around those different styles. Some of them are the top end sort of specs of those styles of racing. Some of them are the classic, iconic sort of examples of those ways to race. So we really think that the content matches beautifully with those 5 experiences. We've got 22 locations in the game. Most of those are circuits as well, which really supports the style of racing in this game. So I think everyone's going to be very happy with the spread and the variety and the diversity in the game.
And I got to drive, I think it was an Audi R8 in San Francisco, and I was kind of crushing it a bit. And like you have a really cool damage system in it, right?
Yeah. I mean, the damage model is something that we've been iterating upon sort of throughout, the full grid series and before that even. You know, it's a real sort of achievement that's been sort of carried on through years of development, and totally something we pushed forward for Grid Autosport. I mean, the whole physics system which underlies the game is hugely complex and hugely accurate. It's actually it's funny, the whole conversation around simulation versus the sort of racing style that we go for. It's sort of by choice though. I mean, we always start with a raw simulation model when we set the cars up, and it's by choice that we then choose to take that to the next level, so that once we have the car handling in a truly physically accurate way, we then work with the race teams and the racing drivers and bring them in to identify the character of the individual cars to try and get, if a certain car understeers a lot or goes into smooth oversteer but then has a tendency to snap oversteer very easily, we tend to sort of tailor the handling model for that car to make sure that character is almost exaggerated slightly, just so that the player fully understands that that's how that car feels to drive. And that's where it kind of sort of transitions from being a simulation game into something that sort of captures the heart and soul of motorsport and sort of gives you the feel of what it's like to actually drive these cars and compete in the race.
Is the damage system mostly visual, or is it also like is it impacting my gameplay then?
It's either, so you can choose in the game. So the demo that you would have seen yesterday, we were running visual only damage so that people didn't get too much trouble. But if you choose, you can have full mechanical damage in the game as well. So that affects a lot of systems in the car. It can be everything from, as you mentioned, San Francisco, those jumps that you have, where every time you land, that'll build up wear on the suspension components. Impacts for other cars could damage the steering input, so you could get drivetrain damage. All of those things can build up and affect your in-race performance. Steering, get tyre blowouts. There's a whole range of things. And following the race, you can then repair your vehicle. You can choose sort of which areas you repair, where you spend your money, and where you choose to sort of scrimp and save a bit. So it's totally up to you how you progress through that.
It's actually funny because I've spent like 2 weeks in San Francisco, and I also had like a pretty crazy taxi ride there. And yeah, it's like pretty cool. I think that's probably one of the first racing games that has like San Francisco in it, with all those jumps.
Yeah, The San Francisco track was one of the iconic kind of tracks that was in Grid 1, and we always do that with our cities. What we do, the actual racing environment isn't real, a grid layout of the actual real city. So we try and take the iconic locations within it, weave them together to make a really interesting racing track. So we brought back San Francisco and Washington from Grid 1, and we brought back our best cities from Grid 2, and all of them provide very different styles of racing, but they all fit around that theme of that really claustrophobic, tight, zero tolerance for crashes in those kind of environments. So it makes for some pretty chaotic racing when you put the AI up to the top difficulty and they're shoving you into a barrier and leaving you behind. It gets pretty intense.
Is that also like kind of the basic of the upgrade system then, that I basically probably first time I'm in San Francisco, I have a lot of problems, like driving around there. Then I need to upgrade my tires and everything.
It shouldn't be along those lines. It'll be more to do, like, for you personally, as like the driving experience. You've got a lot of assists you can turn on to help you drive around there. In terms of like the way the cars upgrade and improve over time, we've got in the career mode, that's kind of dictated by the quality of the team you're racing for. In online, that'll be dictated by how much time you spent with that car and how much you've been racing with that car. And the kind of options you get available to you are all kind of based off the tuning of the handling system we've already got in the game. But they're always kind of trade-offs. It's not like an I win button. There's not some kind of I put this on and my car is like 10% faster than your car. It's sliders that give you sort of trade-offs. So for example, your downforce slider, you could turn that right up to be high. It gives you more grip, but it means you've got less straight line speed. That's a classic example of a kind of trade-off mechanic we've got in there. So all you get for working into your car or gaining more options is more fidelity. You can tune to a higher degree, and it allows you to get that sort of precision that you might want to squeeze that extra performance out of your car, but no one gets that kind of additional bonus that puts them miles ahead of everyone else. So it's always competitive on the track.
And how's about environmental effects? Like I think one of the cool things about Dirt was I think you also did that, right? Have you probably also worked on that on Dirt?
Yeah, so I personally worked on Dirt 2 and Dirt 3, leading into Showdown, and then obviously we moved on to Grid for Grid 2 and Grid Autosport.
Like I think on Dirt you have had a lot of like mud was coming. I think at your at your car, and then you can't really see everything and stuff like that. Is that also involved?
Well, actually, the tracks in Autosport is sort of more built around sort of circuit racing, so you have less off-road stuff, so you don't have so much of the mud build up and the rest. But definitely, sort of the core of what you're asking, basically the technical improvements that we make through these titles all feed back into the Ego engine. So the Dirt games were all built on the Ego engine, and there definitely were technical improvements that were made there. I mean, being off-road titles, it was all about improving the suspension systems and the tyre to track surface contact, and we sped up the processing through the suspension systems to the chassis because it was an off-road title and it was so important. It meant that we could take all of those improvements, essentially feed them back into the Ego engine, and we benefit from that now in Grid Autosport. So it's always evolving the underlying Ego engine.
And are you using a lot like snow and rain and stuff like that? Because I think it's pretty awesome always if you have all the rain clashing on your car, which makes it pretty tough to drive.
Yeah, the kind of attitude we've taken, we've tried to create kind of environments and package them up. So particular environments will have more kind of moody, foggy kind of lighting. Some of them will be much brighter, much more kind of vivid styles. And then we reserved the night racing component for endurance racing. We're not doing variable weather in race. I think that was probably more for the wish list for next gen, I would have thought. But in terms of the actual kind of environment conditions, we try and sell that, what you'd associate a particular circuit or a location with, and we try to kind of provide a really, really kind of cool environmental effect when you get into those tracks.
You just mentioned it, like Grid is now coming out for Xbox 360, PS3, and PC. So was it just about like time? Basically, don't had enough time for next gen, or what was the decision?
I'd say timing rather than time. I think that the key thing really was that we already had a really solid, polished engine from finishing Grid 2, and we wanted to use that again to make this game, and that gave us like a strong platform we could push forward with. But in terms of working on next gen, we are working on next gen technology, and that will feature heavily in our future games. but we don't want to kind of make a game which is kind of a current gen game but sort of ported onto next gen. When we do next gen, we want to do it properly. We want to make sure we're supporting features that really support those consoles. So we'll get there soon, but right now the right sort of combination is those platforms, because we know that there's millions of people that have still got 360s and PS3s, and obviously the PC guys, they don't want to wait any longer for a new game. We're ready to go with this one, so we don't want to wait anymore.
But you're thinking about doing a next gen port then, or?
We're not at the moment for Grid Autosport, no, but we are working on next gen technology for building up for our future racing games.